that one of the most dangerous places in the football field is the practice field. It's not the main field. And the biggest thing that concerns me is that a lot of these things, especially things like concussions and leg injuries, are happening for football players in practice, which is why I'm even advocating for the limitation of live contact, whether it be tackling or thudding during practice, because we recognize where these risks happen.
The second topic. The NFL is under fire for allowing a seemingly concussed player to go back on the field. The NFL may rightly deserve blame if they are creating an unsafe work environment, but are they the only ones at fault? Are the fans responsible for supporting a brutal sport? And are parents at fault for encouraging their kids to participate? So yeah, there is a football player named, I don't know how the fuck to pronounce this name. Tua Tagovailoa.
Tua Tagovailoa.
Sure, whatever. TT. He
the most disrespectful name he's been given thus far, TT.
I'm sorry. I just don't know what the Tua.
My niece and nephew call me TT.
Yeah.
Point
Tua.
proven.
Tua. I don't know. But anyway, he got concussed, but then he ended up back on the field later on. And this became a whole big thing. And it seems to me, just quickly, it seems to me that a lot of people are trying to claim a moral high ground on this, as to, hey, we need to protect the players, but still, I want to have the sport where the concussions are involved, right? Like that these things are like intertwined, right? But damn you, NFL, for not doing a really good job of protecting them. So I'm wondering, like, is there more blame to go around here? So we'll start with my man Bam.
Dang, getting off mute was hard. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like people always have this beef specifically for football. I don't understand why there's anything people voluntarily go into has like a risk of potential damages that no one ever wants to talk about. But it always comes back to football. I think that the NFL is an organization. Well, actually, it's the richest organization sports league on the planet, and they do actually have a responsibility to their players and members. The fact that there was a doctor that ended up getting fired because they didn't properly evaluate Tua after his first concussion, and then like he went on to play 4 days later. Again, I don't blame Tua himself, because when you are a member of a team, you have a desire to not want to let your team down. So like you try to like push through things. So like that does happen, but like that organization, they have the money, they have the responsibility, they have the resources to they should do a better job of protecting them from themselves. And this has nothing to do with fans. It has nothing to do with like other people taking a moral high ground. I think that it's a wonderful sport, the greatest sport God ever blessed us with. And I don't know. We'll just go into more specifics from there. I just think that everything about this is what I want to fight about.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
Can I go next?
You want to go next? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll let you go next.
Thank you thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm going to plant my flag. Football should be banned. It's a dumb sport. Nobody should be playing football, even watching football. Kind of dumb.
Says the fucking Canadian.
Even Canadian football should be banned. I think, especially given that I think there's a good enough amount of evidence to show that pretty much you're at higher risk of CTE and other neurological conditions, and especially it seems like, and I might be wrong, but it seems like, children can very often get, socialized towards football from a young age, as in I think even high schoolers play football. And it's understandable if they're good at it and there's enough incentive, they want to continue on with that. And they probably haven't really actually thought out or don't really understand the ramifications when it comes to the long-term potential complications of playing football. And so, yeah, football should be banned, and I would entertain other sports as well.
Scott.
All right, so I'm going to say something very close to what Corey said. I think enrolling your child in tackle football is tantamount to child abuse, and you should not be able to maintain control of your children at that point. It is very, very obvious that there is extreme risks to the constant traumatic brain injuries from football. That it's difficult to tell. We just have like autopsy reports of individuals that were in the NFL. Out of 111 suspected cases of TBI, they found 110 had had signs of CTE. Even if we were able to take every single NFL person that had died since then, it would still be 9% rate if all of them were negative. Like, it is a serious problem that leads to permanent brain damage. This permanent brain damage increases aggression, increases memory loss, leads to dementia, leads to depression, lack of impulse control. There is a reason why football players can't stop beating their wives, and some of the reason for that is because of the traumatic brain injuries. Now, if you want to have flag football or no tackle football of some kind, and you want to hone your skills, and as an adult you want to engage in that behavior, that's your choice. But you need to have informed consent. And it is exactly this reason that I think the NFL should be sued out of existence. I don't agree that $1 billion plan to settle their contracts is enough. And the reason for that is very simple. They committed fraud. Individuals went to them and signed contracts. And despite the fact that Dr. Bennett Omalu had discovered from Iron Mike Webster that CTE existed and was a prevalent and severe issue in the NFL, they did everything they could to discredit him. They lied about him. They hired their own scientists to spread rumors. Since the 1990s, they knew about these issues, and instead they set up the minor traumatic brain injury system as a means of trying to downplay and lie to people. And this is tantamount to fraud. They should be sued out of existence for everyone that has ever been a part of the NFL that can show traumatic brain injuries. And then if a new organization wants to start up, they can start up and they can do whatever the fuck they want with adults. But children should not be susceptible to traumatic brain injuries over and over again for fun. It's just it's child abuse at this point. I would say the same thing about anybody that allows head kicks in Taekwondo or in teaching kids MMA. I would say the same thing about certain portions of hockey. I would say anything that encourages repeated traumatic brain injury is tantamount to child abuse. And you can hate me and you can say you love your football all you want, but permanent damaging of your children's bodies and minds is child abuse, period.
Again, I love how we have 5 people here. Oh, I want to stake a claim. No, thank you for that, Scott. Let's go to Joe.
I just didn't think we'd run into 2009 arguments about this. I thought we'd move past that, but I guess not. That's all right. It's not the early 2000s anymore. Fans are not stupid. Parents are not stupid. Coaches are not stupid. They're aware of the risks and challenges that face football. And when it comes to the NFL, it just seems that time and time again, they lag a little bit behind of the consensus that's from underneath it. Certain states, like in New Jersey, we have limitations of tackle football. We have limitations of contact, whether it be thudding or tackling. But the biggest thing, like expansions of helmets and what helmets are used, the NFL has finally did that and finally like trying to have like a much more conscious and aggressive process of which helmets are regulated, which helmets are unregulated. Also they're still not quite there when it comes to contact restrictions, but that's like what I'm talking about, where it's like they kind of figured this out at the youth level, they figured this out at the high school level, but it seems like the NFL is constantly lagging behind. As far as the Tua situation is concerned directly, it just kind of falls on the Miami Dolphins, and also it falls on the concussion protocol, where since there's a level of subjectivity that comes with the concussion protocol, you can have players that kind of skirt away with certain injuries. But even in this case, it was very clear that Tua the first time when he got hit against the Colts, he was concussed. Like, and this is just was the consensus of like there's nobody acts like that as they're walking back to a play. But granted, there's a level of subjectivity that goes within the percussion protocol that allows it to happen. So firing the doctor that reviewed him does absolutely nothing. I think what is good about this is that there is a hope that there's going to be a revision of the concussion protocol. That's something that's already being talked about by the coaches and players alike. So we're probably going to see some type of change about that towards the end of the year, because thankfully now there's a players organization that actually treats this seriously. Because again, it's not the early 2000s and 90s anymore. But yeah, like it's a slower process than I'd want, but we're getting there. I'm gonna let my child play sports because I'm not a fascist. So that's all I got for now. Maybe we'll argue, but we'll see what happens.
Brian
This is
Flores
great.
tried to tell us.
Sorry, what?
I was saying Brian Flores tried to like show us that the Dolphins are a horrible organization.
Let's
He
go.
was-
I mean, we knew this too. Like, we
Black
knew the
to
Dolphins
white.
suck.
Very excited what you have to say.
Yeah, I pretty much agree on the idea of kids should be limited in doing this. You know, when I played soccer as a kid, and my parents were very firm with the coach. He's not allowed to give headers because constant soccer ball hitting on your head over time, there's some evidence that can cause some injury. Obviously, not as bad as football, but so that's I just wasn't allowed to do it, and I could play soccer just fine. Common sense restrictions like that on as many sports as possible to limit the injuries that can happen to children, I'm fine with. Once you become an adult, I don't care if you want to play with a razor ball taped football, right? As long if you can consent to it, right? You know, you're an adult, you can make it. It could be blood sports. You can make it as violent as TV will allow. Maybe you got to put the show on like a adult only channel or something. Blood football. I don't know. You can do whatever you want. When it comes to kids, I definitely understand the concern. Would I go as far as banning all contact sports? I mean, I would definitely be in favor of making sure they're mandated safe. And for certain sports like boxing or MMA or football, perhaps those are contact football. Perhaps those are sports that kids should not be playing. Perhaps that should be left up to universities and the pro league. As to this person in particular, even if you're an adult and you consent to, getting maimed in whatever way you so choose, the one concern I do have is, if you lose your leg and you want to keep playing, I don't care. If you get part of your like torso removed and you want to keep playing, I don't care. When it affects your head, when it affects your consciousness and your ability to consent to things following, then I start getting more concerned, right? Because the whole idea of looking at rational actors as being able to consent is that they're rational actors. And if you have somebody who's concussed beyond belief and is agreeing to keep playing when in reality they can't really agree to keep playing, that's where I get concerned. I don't think people who are concussed should be able to keep playing because I don't think they can continue to consent to that risk. But as long as you're of sound mind, you can basically consent to whatever crazy shit you want. But no kids.
Ginger.
Yeah, I feel like the NFL pays their players just enough money to keep them on the field until they're injured enough to no longer be able to play and no longer to be able to do anything else. The NFL is about the money, and the players are just that to them, just money. They do not care about their health. It is clear from what we've seen. And as far as kids being able to play it, I don't think they should be allowed either. Touch football, no tackle, completely fine. But being able to play a sport that injures grown adults' brains, imagine what it does to the children. So.
Sprout.
All right, so a few things to point out. Corey's saying football should be banned, should be completely discounted since he's a Canadian. He knows nothing about American football. Just completely discount his opinion during this entire topic. He's Canadian. So Scott, he basically equates football to child abuse, but only mentioned brain injuries. Would talk about people in the NFL. Did not mention brain injuries in regards to the high school sport level. For in regards to other sports, did not mention anything regarding high school. Did not mention anything regarding minors as to injuries. Only mentioned injuries in the retrospect of talking about professional football. I agree the concussion protocol needs to be upped. But the simple idea here is that everything involves a certain amount of risk, especially when you're playing sports. I played tennis and I got a concussion playing tennis. I ran into the fence trying to get a ball that was headed towards the fence and bounce and basically hit it back. I was able to hit it back, but I ran into the fence. The fence was not rigid, and so I actually ran into the fence, and the fence bounced me back out. I ended up hitting my head against the concrete. And the person who was in charge of concussion protocol for the team that I was playing, because I was away, was basically made me do sprints and said I wasn't concussed. Which, by the way, I don't know if you know anything about concussions. Sprints is not how you tell if someone's concussed or not. And so my coach was pissed off. And then I went back to playing because I was told I wasn't concussed. I swore every ball went through my racket. And then when I talked to my medic for my team, my medic took me off the court immediately. And said I was concussed. And so there needs to be professionals that are able to tell concussions from non-concussions, and they need to be absolutely neutral to the game. They're not a team's professional, nothing. They need to be neutral to the game and be able to actually evaluate the player as to whether the player is concussed or not. And that seems to be what the NFL is doing. The NFL is not all about it for the money and nothing about the health of the players. As a matter of fact, the NFL made the offensive lineman, which has received the most amount of concussions, wear the extra padding over the helmets during practice and during the training games to try and help the offensive linemen not get concussed during those times. So I think the NFL is certainly trying to protect its players. I think it's got a long ways to go, don't get me wrong, but I do not think football should be banned. Every sport contains a certain amount of risk. As a matter of fact, you sign a liability waiver when you play a sport for a high school, and certainly playing a sport in high school is not tantamount to child abuse.
UV.
I'm actually pretty torn on this one. I think I'd like to hold off and listen to the arguments first.
You mean like a liberal?
Based.
All right. So
Plant your flag, Doobie. What the fuck?
No, I have no flag this time. Okay.
all right, open to the panel.
Yeah, I think that I think that if you're not really engaged with the sport, I feel like people below the number of players who again, CTE is still like a sort of a new thing. I mean, like we've known about it since since the 80s, but as far as like the research that is being done into it now, like it's still not a super common thing. Like I think there's actually I saw something saying that there's like you have a higher percentage chance of like children who were in band in high school ended up experiencing deafness, like a loss of hearing throughout their lifetime. But I don't hear like a big crackdown about children shouldn't be allowed to play instruments. Music is child abuse. Like
this is a bad example, just because CTE is fairly unique, and there's a reason why. Well, there's multiple reasons why there's not a lot of research about CTE, and one of the reasons is because it's impossible to diagnose, or you only diagnose it until the person is dead. You only officially diagnose it, similar to Alzheimer's. It's only through autopsy. So, like, yeah, it's no surprise that it's not. Go ahead, Joe.
We can recognize that there just seems to be better preventative measures and active research and information on this, and information that goes down to players and parents alike. Because going as far, I mean, I don't think you mentioned they were going to want to ban it or anything, but yeah, like again, I can't stress it enough. Like we have regulations that are at the youth level, that are at the high school level, and at the college level. The NCAA, they're kind of weird because they're recommendations, but most colleges adopt the NCAA recommendations, and I think they need to be more strict on that. But
And it's also something that it's also a number that like it's something we've because of the stress we put into it. It's a number that's been like constantly going down. Again, like using the NFL, which is like the highest level of the game, isn't even necessarily a great example. But I think they were down to I think there's like 1900 players in the league, and I think there's a 17 game season, so there's like I think like 30,000 attempts, like 30,000 player like attempts to have concussion over a NFL season. I think last year you had 170, which I don't know what percentage of what percent that is, but it's like it's something that's still not obviously where you want it to be, but is a number that like is in a decline because we are actually getting better at equipment. Where is like if you watch football, there's a really big what
Concussions are
focus
going concussions are going down.
focus and players not using like leading with their head, like because that's actually
But-
the biggest priority of it.
But also we can recognize too, if we're gonna like keep things transparent, that there needs to be better regulations in terms of certain hits, right? Like the first initial thing which they did, which was understandable, and like what they should have done years ago, was the idea of using your helmet as a weapon. But now a big problem about this, and thank God the Kelseys have a podcast now that like brings light to this. Like defensive tackles and defensive ends are now using their shoulder blades as a weapon when they're cutting on edges. So what they end up doing is once the ball, I'm going to normalize this to the best of my ability, and Sprout might know what I'm talking about too. When the ball snaps, defensive ends now go in an angle to cut inside or cut outside, leading with their shoulder blade. And
Yes.
basically what happens is that just rocks, and Kelsey talked about it in his pocket, it just rocks your face mask. It's
Well,
an
actually,
exact
they'll
same.
do that. They'll do that when they tackle too, and oftentimes
Yeah.
they get called for it though, because when you're talking about the NFL, you're talking about people who are extremely fast. And
Mhm.
so when you try to lead with your shoulder towards their head, you'll actually more than likely end up making head-to-head contact, and referees will call that.
Yeah,
So
Gronkowski
it's
changed
a
his-
lot easier. It's a lot easier to see when a wide receiver's doing it than when it's offensive linemen, because offensive linemen just kind of jump to the snap, and it's a lot
Yep.
harder to actually catch when it's offensive linemen or defensive
Yeah, I mean,
linemen.
for fuck's sake, that's why Gronkowski changed his face mask, because every single time that was just a thing that people did to him, and he's just like, I'm like, literally, there's like I forget which there's like a really like funny clip where he's just like, I'm sick of this shit. Like they keep going after my face mask, and then you have Tom Brady just kind of like, like
Here's the ball.
yeah. Yeah, but that's like but again, like to be transparent, that's another problem that leads to head injury, because we understand that like when you take one aspect of a player, they're just going to use another part of their equipment to use to lead and to take a player out, especially, and this is like something that's very common in pro wide receivers. This is why some of them just like outright avoid the middle of the field. And this is like the one reason why the free safety position had to be revised, thanks to players like not excluding but not excluding to Brian Dawkins, John Lynch, Roy Williams.
You forgot Bob Sanders.
Bob
would
Sanders,
lay the
Troy
people the fuck out.
Polamalu. And they had free reign. They were doing shoulder and helmet. They didn't give
They
a
locked
fuck.
their whole body.
What's the,
Yeah.
what's the risk of like brain damage, specifically from high school football? Right, not,
From
I'm not
high
talking-
school football?
I'm not talking the NFL. stuff,
I actually
because-
sure
I
it's
actually have the
dramatically
stats
lower.
here. The stats here for high school football. It was the majority of injuries. The majority of football injuries. It was actually the majority of injuries sports wide. It was the majority of actually soccer injuries as well. But 21.7% of all football injuries in high school was a concussion, followed that by ankle sprains. But
I'm saying how many like total like of the people who play football in high school, how
Of
many
the
how
entirety?
many get
The
concussions?
aggregate?
for the
Close enough to you is
28 for the
10 for every
2018-2019 school year, it's 99,036 people got concussed throughout the 2018-2019 school year.
And,
Yeah,
and again,
I'm
that-
saying I'm
that
looking
ig-
up 10 for 10,000. So
and
I
that
guess
ignores
that's like 0.4%.
like one of the problems with CTE. It's cumulative damage over time. Like sure,
Yes.
the rate of concussions can be low, but you can like isolate it to high school, but it's the reality of like playing football for like whatever decades.
But if we
or
isolate the
whatever.
high school, then
That's like
we're
99% of
talking
people won't make it
we're
that far.
talking about the accusation of child abuse being tandem to
Right.
to
So
playing
that
football, which it just isn't accurate.
so that's what my concern is, right? Because I'm only interested in isolating it to high school because that's when you have kids playing. That's when you have minors engaging in an activity that I'd be concerned if this activity was inherently dangerous. 99,000, I mean, that could be a lot, just in
You
terms
have
of.
millions of high school players a year.
But that also
That-
ignores
that's also reported. That's reported concussions. I
Well,
guess
there's also like just to be clear too, if we're being transparent, that a lot of these injuries also come from special teams, where kind of like we figured out. When I say we, not we, I didn't do shit, but basically coaches and athletic coaches figured out that hey, there are problems with players getting hit in certain types of schemes and certain types of setups, but the one area that's kind of been neglected, admittedly, is special teams, where a lot of players use that as a vehicle to fuel themselves to be on the team. And a lot of times that's where the most vicious hits come from. Where
Which is
like
actually why
even
the NFL. It's actually why the NFL moved the touchback for the kickoff to
Mhm.
the 25-yard line instead of the 20-yard line to try and provide more of an incentive for the person who is fielding the kickoff to kneel it in the end zone, take the touchback instead of trying to run it out to move the starting point further out to take a touchback.
It also
Yeah,
put
there's
the personal
even
protectors in the front closer to each other because they realize, like, you know what? Giving someone a 40-yard head start, probably like pull out is probably not for the best.
and then mind you too, like just in terms of transparency, like we had 2 players in Jersey die due to head related injuries. We don't know what the final confirmation is, but it happened 2 days in a row where just one kid just didn't wake up for school and the other one I think just died at practice or something like that. And the big thing was they were both on special teams. It happened on special teams related injuries.
Yeah,
And like now finally the NJSIA is like, okay, we more probably gonna ban kickoffs. So
and this
and that's like a net good, I think. Like
this is anecdotal as well, but like I knew a kid in high school who was on the football team, and he got messed up. He had multiple brain surgeries, removed fragments of skull from the back of his head. It was a horrific injury.
Mhm.
And looking back on that, I guess that's one instance can cause a memory like that to last. But we obviously want to restrict minors from doing inherently dangerous activities. But if the injury rate, if the concussion rate truly is so low, I'll have to look at what percentage of kids play football. What's the estimated percentage of concussions here? But if it's so low, I mean, how much more dangerous is it really compared to something like driving or something like, eating junk food? When you compare
Well,
the long term effects of these things, because
everything
junk food probably kills way more people than football does.
every,
Or are we in
Sure.
favor of preventing kids from eating junk food?
everything
Well,
has risk. Everything has a certain amount of risk to it. And according to a 2017 study of almost 4,000 high school football players, finds no relationship between playing football and cognition or mental health later in life when the men were 65. This study also stressed the trade-offs that sportiness has health benefits. Men who had played football in high school were more physically active at age 35 than non-players. And so there's been studies that have shown that playing high school football has little to no actual effect on the cognitive ability or your mental health ability later on in life. It is when you start playing college football or when you start playing NFL that people start recognizing this thing. It's because you're getting hit much harder. You're not playing high school players. You're playing college players. These people have been selected from their high schools as the best of the best. So when you start moving towards the best of the best, there's going to be harder hits. There's going to be a lot more chance of injuries. As you can see in the NFL, the rate of injury is much higher than it is in the high school level because you're playing against professionals. And so it's very, very hard to compare what happens to NFL players to what happens to high schoolers.
Yeah,
well, we
but
also
that
go for it. Go
Those are
ahead,
all
sorry.
good. Those are all good points. Yeah, I
no,
don't
I
know.
was gonna. I
So
was.
there's
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you could like maybe send some of that stuff in the group chat, because
Yeah,
there's
I've got the
some
2017
studies.
study right here. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's one from 2020 that's from American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons that there's increased rates of concussion despite all the things that are occurring. To make it
And
less.
what at
Then of
what
course
level?
there's
Increase compared
other
to what?
increased concussion rates in high school football.
This is a
I just
longitude study, so it's actually studying the players far after they're done playing, like age 65 and age 35. It's a longitude study, not necessarily a study.
Yeah, the problem with that, and both of these studies present problems, right? TBI is a really difficult thing to study. And the problem is both of these studies have problems. Number one, it's not really a longitudinal study if it's just comparing elderly individuals, right, that say that they played football, right? Because what you're having to do is what you're saying is this select group of people played football. So I mean, I'll have to look at the study to see how they're comparing it to the general population and whether or not that's necessarily even transferable to other people playing now. And then, of course, what they were doing back then was probably worse, right? If we're going to be honest, like, you know,
Almost
if
leather
they're
helmets.
65, they're probably, I was about to say, they're probably rocking like leather helmets and shit, right? So this is probably the worst of the worst. You're absolutely correct that individuals that are older. But yeah, is it a majority of sports concussions? There's so many issues here. Like almost half of these injuries occur during practice, these concussions. We're not even talking about during the game.
In what context?
Concussions in
No, he's
high
actually
school
right.
individuals.
He's actually right. Most concussions
no,
in
we
high
got-
school
well,
end up during practice.
Right. So let's be specific here. But right, like that's the because if we're talking about like if we're talking about the NFL, this is a different conversation we're talking about in high school. And then the reasons why that exists are different from what's going on.
For sure. In terms of the NFL, I don't give a fuck. Like, do whatever the fuck you want, so long as you have informed consent. I'm just saying that the NFL has committed certain crimes, which is they obviously knew that this was a bigger issue, and they attempted to discredit scientists. They banned them from events. They set up their own kind of paid studies that most of which couldn't even get peer reviewed or published in journals, and they put them out anyways. Like they knew that this was a problem, and they spent a lot of money to try and make sure that it went under the rug. And this is a form of fraud because they're not.
always lame.
telling those
That
people.
sounds like capitalism to me.
So here's what I'm
capitalism, right? Like now, what's going on currently? Yeah, I think they're taking the issue seriously and attempting to make changes. And if people are aware of the dangers currently, like that's what you sign up for as an adult. And I would say this is even true of college ball, right? Now, when we're talking about high school football, I think that the data is really kind of inconclusive. But what we do know is that repeated concussions are really, really, really fucking bad and cause permanent damage. Not only do they cause some form of permanent damage, they change your impulse control. They lead to depression, anxiety. Now, whether or not that leads to CTE, again, CTE is a relatively new thing that we're attempting to understand. But like repeated traumatic brain injuries, like just look at Doobie. I know loves this stuff. Just look at serial killers. Most serial killers had a pretty severe head trauma at some point. Like you usually, like it's a pretty common thing amongst serial killers. Like having repeated head trauma is really fucking bad. Does that mean
the common thing?
Football?
The common thing about serial killers is trauma in general. And most serial killers didn't experience head trauma. Most serial killers experienced childhood trauma in which it was their parents. When you talk about like the most notorious serial killers, you're talking about their parents did stuff to them as kids. And that is the trauma that's leading them to this. It's not a concussion. I wouldn't go as far as to say concussions produce serial killers, and I certainly wouldn't go as far as to say that having your kid play football is tantamount to child abuse. So especially with this 2017 study that I posted in the chat, saying that there's just people who played in high school. There's no difference between the people who played in high school and the people who didn't play in high school. When you talk about mental cognition and you talk about mental illness, there's no difference between the two.
Here's the other
Ron
concern.
cares so little about football that he checked out of his own panel.
I'm still here. What?
Wait,
okay.
So Sprout,
Sir,
hold on. Real
Can
quick.
I just challenge that super quick?
I want to
I said-
follow up.
Oh, no. I want to hear
Like,
from
I'm
like to
fucking
wait.
not.
Let's wait and then Scott.
Yeah, it's just like a tag on, because I think this highlights my issue with this, which is if the study that Sprout's referring to is correct, then that also could lead to another situation here of, well, if we did ban kids from playing it, we know that exercise has demonstrably good effects when it comes to your cognition. We know that exercise is good for everything, basically. And we know that it's very important for kids to develop exercise habits early. And having a wide variety of sports options for kids can make it easier for them to get involved in exercise that could lead to long-lasting benefits for their entire life. So the risk of shutting kids out of exercise at a time of an obesity epidemic, unless we have very solid evidence here, which based on the study doesn't seem like we do have very solid evidence. I mean, I would need to see pretty solid evidence to counter the assumption here that we should be trying to get kids active, right?
Well, there's multiple ways of getting like you're making it seem like football is like one of the very few outlets for physical activity. There are many ways of cultivating physical activity that, like, if you just remove football at the high school level, like I really don't think that's going to have any sort of dramatic detrimental
The
effect
largest
over
sport
the
in the
long term.
country, and it's the only sport. It's the only sport on the high school level who has like more than 15 members on a team. Like football is something.
Second. It's usually the second largest, most participated sport or an activity next to marching band. It's usually football, marching band, and they're both self-feeding machines.
Football.
Marching
band is there because of the football. Let's be honest.
But this is this is American football. You're saying like other countries don't have physical activity, and also like if this is the most
the British have rugby. You're right. I played rugby and I played rugby in college. Like are you gonna say that rugby's better?
Rugby has more concussions than football.
Rugby does have far more concussions than American football.
I said during my opening statement that I'd entertain potentially other sports as well, as in like there's so many other ways. As someone who's probably like the most athletic on the panel, there's so many ways of being physically active than just football.
You want to see my shot put? You want to see my shot put stats, friend?
You want to call me? I will gladly go toe to toe with anybody. I literally do fitness.
Post physique.
Go ahead.
I'd probably knock you out in round one. So let's not dick measure athleticism. But it's all good. I know you didn't mean to do that, but
so Corey. So even if you're right that football overall represents kind of a small number of people comparatively, which it likely does. I mean, even though it's one of the largest, probably the largest sport in among high schoolers, and definitely the largest sport in the whole country. And even if it's true that most students will find a different sport to like if you ban their favorite sport, what the study Sprout was referring to said that there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that there's actually these long-term effects that we're concerned about. So even if the overall negative effect is small, and I think there will be some negative effect, right? There's some kids who just want to play football, and they're not going to be as active if they're not playing football. And so the question is, does this number of kids that are now going to sink into obesity, does that outweigh, figuratively, the amount of people who are injured as a kid, like with concussions?
Like they're not going to go from wanting to play football to all of a sudden wanting to play tennis.
You do realize that despite you having the availability of football, you still have an obesity epidemic. That's just a testament to how poorly you tackle the issue, and that like
wouldn't that make it worse though? Like not having
that just means
Canadian is swinging hard on the fat Americans. Let's go.
That just means that banning football alone is not like the answer alone to like solving the obesity. As in, like you can do other measures. It's not like mutually exclusive. As in, like,
Okay, we can recognize
it's epidemic though, right? So there's all sorts of things that we can do to help solve the obesity epidemic. The major thing is ending corn subsidies, because that's a disgusting practice that's leading to, I think, to a lot of this. But we're dealing with it. At the end of the day, we're still here. We're sitting in an obesity epidemic, and we want kids to get active, right? I mean, we're airing commercials trying to encourage kids. They're releasing games that are focused on getting kids out of the house. Like we're kind of desperate, right? I don't understand why.
I agree. And there's answers to that. It's just that you don't happen to implement them.
Well, a lot of the obesity issue actually, there's been some studies to prove this. A lot of the obesity issues is because people play sports in high school. They're very active in high school, so they train themselves to a diet. And then they stop being active after they're done playing the sport. And so then their body's still accustomed to that diet, and they will continue to eat that diet. And then they're just not burning the same amount of calories they did when playing the sport.
So football encourages obesity is what you're saying.
No, but what I'm saying is being active and accustoming yourself to a diet that is good for that level of activeness. Then continuing to keep up that diet after you're no longer active. Is contributes to obesity.
I don't think that.
Did you not get that joke?
I don't think that the banning or even advocating for banning is a realistic argument or realistic solution. We recognize that the game, it can be safe. We recognize where the game isn't safe, and we can just do some pretty simple things. The NCAA has a few more problems because they're more mandate the shit or they're not going to do anything about it. Because if we can have mandates in high school, we can have mandates in college. I like mine are pretty simple personally. I think full contact during the season should be limited to 15 hours per week. During the preseason of that, you can probably extend it to like 2.5 to 3 hours. I'm a bit authoritarian. I'm closer to 15 during the regular season, 30 during the off season. I think that of that 15 minutes, it can only be spent for 2 out of your 5 practices. So I think 3 days should be dedicated to non-contact or minimal contact. 1 day dedicated to tackling, 1 day dedicated to thudding. But the thudding and tackling has to be a cumulative of 15 hours during the regular season, and then 30 minutes during the off season or preseason rather. That's basically where Jersey's at. I'm with them on that. Also, I think that we need to ban turf fields. Period. I think that's another part of
Really bad
of the
ligaments.
of the concussion process, of the ligament process. It's very, very clear that grass fields, although they might be harder to maintenance when it comes to the high school level, and I recognize the cost of that, it's just that it's causing too many kids damage, and these fields are being used outside of football. You got to go to grass, and just spend the money to allocate that, or at least do something to cultivate that. And then I'm more strict. I think that needs to be like banned outright in college. I think turf fields should be banned outright, period. But I think the first fight is at the NFL level, but that seems to have a lot more steam than it is at the college level. Because again, like these fields are used for multi-use, and I recognize that. But listen, like I'd rather have kids and young adults being able to walk and not have brain damage due to the surfaces that they're playing on. You know.
And Lacto, to what you brought up earlier, in terms of like, if there's if what Sprouticus pointed or posted is correct, in that there's minimal risk in terms of long term of high school football players, I would say that ignores the fact that I think it's safe to say that like if you start children out of sport young, they are likely to continue playing that. As in, like I think it's fair to say like the pool of college players like comes from high school. As in, like you are socializing kids into that sport. And to your junk food analogy that you brought up earlier, just as a question of curiosity, how are you in terms of like, are you okay with marketing junk food to children? Because that's how I sort of view it. In terms of like you are marketing football to children.
I would cut down on what can be like in terms of junk food being sold or marketed to kids. I think that's way more harmful demonstrably than football is so far. It just, I guess my philosophy is that in order to ban something, it needs to be proven to be an issue. And I guess I'm not convinced for minors it is an issue because, we're not dealing with the circumstance. It's an activity. It's not like, once you become an adult, you can't choose to continue playing football or choose to not continue playing football if you want to continue to like go down that path, right? You can. So really the only concern I have is when you're a kid playing football, what's the risk? And if the risk is high enough, well, then yeah, there should be more restrictions. And we should obviously be, aired towards the side of safety and, put these kids in bubble wrap and helmets and shit. But I mean, if there's nothing that seems to indicate that they're in a lot of risk, and banning it could prevent them from, doing something that they love and doing something that is good for them and potentially a career down the line. This seems like
I mean, I would say,
unjustified.
I would say this, that if the risk is so low that it's not any more than any other sport, really, like in any significant way, right? Like if you were able to bring the concussions,
like,
right? But if you could bring it
down
closer to, right? But what I mean to say is, like, if you can bring it to where it's not, let's say, an entire standard deviation above soccer, which I think in some places where the restrictions are done well, it's there. It's already there, right? In other places, it's not. If you can get it to that point, then I don't think that there's any provable harm that you're really demonstrating by putting someone in this sport. Now, because I think the only way that you can justify, as far as I can tell, whether or not it's considered a forestallment of your guardianship, right? Like whether or not you have harmed your child permanently is not something happened to them. It's, would a reasonable person believe that they subjected them to risk and that risk led to that something happening. And then we're in that position. And so if you can get football injury rates at the high school level down to a point where it's not that different from any other sport or any other activity, then, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, even if an injury does occur. Because like Sprouticus said earlier, there's a risk to driving. There's a risk to anything that you fucking do. And, doing a pure kind of like cost benefit analysis of what's going on is, to everything is going to lead to the worst helicopter parenting imaginable. That isn't really going to be beneficial to anybody. So like if you can do practices where you're only tackling once a week and you're teaching techniques that are less likely to lead to head trauma, and you're able to have better inspected helmets, and you're fixing certain issues that lead towards additional trauma, you're doing everything that you can, and you bring those rates down closer to something like soccer, which I think is the number 2 for head injuries. At that point, a reasonable person would not assume that their child is going to be subjected to multiple head injuries. But if you're in a situation where those things aren't being done, then I think it's obvious that you're subjecting your child to a situation where they're likely to be permanently damaged and harmed, and you actively chose to put your child in that harm, and they're unable to consent. And this, as far as I'm concerned, is a forestallment of your guardianship, that you no longer have a right to parent that child if you're doing that.
I think
I'm
that
gonna hold on. I'm just
Go
gonna
for it,
I'm gonna
Ginger.
stick in for a second. I am not feeling very well. That's why I've been quiet all night. I'm gonna bow out. I'm feeling really awful. Thank you for having me, Prime, and it was really nice
Feel
meeting
better.
you guys.
Have a good one,
Good night.
Ginger.
Feel better, Tucker?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like
Oh, you good?
I'm just again, I'm not for the like. Okay, where do I start? If you knowingly do not follow procedure that a authoritative body determines for you to do for your child for a head injury, you should probably get somebody called on your ass. Like, I'm just gonna kind of make that
Right.
clear. Now, like, I'm a bit strict on it. I think that there needs to be a full investigation, determine abuse in situations like that, but those situations are also rare. We're not seeing parents in mass like forcing their kids to go through concussed, and the reason why is that, again, like, the high school level takes this shit seriously. In Jersey, I think you're 2 weeks out. I think it's 1 or 2 weeks. I don't remember the exact measurement of like no physical activity at all. You get signed off to like if you have gym class, you get exempted from that for 1 to 2 weeks. Depending on the severity, you get like they force you to see medical professionals to even get cleared to come back. And if you don't need to do that, or you don't have the resources to do that, in some districts like mine, they say, great, if you can't pay for it, we'll pay for it for you. So they want to make sure the kids, if they receive some type of like traumatic brain injury, that they're being seen with the right professional, and the professional has to be independent. It cannot be a professional that's recommended by the district or by the school. They give you, they say like, you have to go out and get this, and it's like, okay, where do I go? It's like, we can't make a recommendation for you. However, they can make the situation where if you go and see a health professional and you don't have health insurance, but the school will front the bill. I think that's a good thing, because parents do not all have the
I know
great
that-
financial
I
situation.
just want to say
usually
something
when
else.
you I know that usually when you show up to these, you tend to have data and statistics from your own state. It's just kind of how you are. Do you have the rates of concussion and the rates of the percentage of people that are concussed multiple times?
Concussions aren't
Because-
reported at the high school level in New Jersey. It's an opt-in basis
That's
for
problem.
It's an opt-in basis for
that-
research
that's a
depending
ser-
on
that's
district.
a serious issue.
This is
because,
the
I mean,
same. This is hold on, wait. I want to make this very clear. This is not a New Jersey exclusive problem. A lot of states are very hot and loose when it comes to brain
I'm not-
injuries and data.
I'm not blaming New Jersey. You seem to believe that New Jersey is better than a lot of states in certain.
I'm in terms they are better in terms of preventative measures, because in my state there's an authoritative body that rules over high school athletics, which is the NJISAA.
I'm
That's what
not
I'm saying.
talking shit. I'm not.
Doesn't
no,
every
just-
state
I'm saying,
doesn't every state have that? Because we have the IHSAA.
Yeah, some states have, like, the reason why I say it's a bit more authoritarian than some other states is that ours is like, they're not recommendations. These are things that you have to do. And then if you're not in compliance, they'll come down on you hard. Like they'll
Okay,
take
'cause
they'll take titles away, they'll take records away, they'll take scores away, they'll go after your ass.
the IHSAA actually forces you, if the coach sees that you've incurred what they deem to be a head injury, they force you to go see a medic to be evaluated. So it isn't like by voluntary, at least in Indiana, it's not voluntary that you get medically evaluated after you're deemed to be concussed.
And
so
the
my,
NCAA,
my question is this then.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Black.
no, just like I played high school and college football. High school is very state to state, but I know that in the state of Georgia, we had we matched the NCAA rule of the 3-strike policy, which is if at any point during your high school career you suffered three concussions, you're just done with contact sports. Not
Yeah,
just
our district is 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's
Okay, so that's what I was
and
kind of
but
getting
it's
at,
also
right?
for
Like,
college sports. In college
Yeah.
in college football, if you've had 3 concussions, you can't play anymore. Like this isn't something they like. Just they're letting you suscept to over and over and over again.
right, because if you have multiple concussions, we know that there are serious fucking risks, right? Like it's very difficult to distinguish traumatic brain injury from post-traumatic stress disorder. One of the key things you can tell, other than obviously the environmental factors, like what caused it, is like restless leg syndrome. Believe it or not, like restless leg syndrome, super common with multiple TBIs, not very common with PTSD. But we know that, you know, if you have multiple traumatic brain injuries, that like you're leading to like aggressive behavior, depression, all kinds of issues that are really fucking serious. So I'm glad you kind of answered that question of like, in certain districts, if you have more than 2 or more than 3, like you're fucking done, period.
Well,
What
the
is
one
the
thing
prevalence rate of multiple concussions, either in a season or throughout a career, that you think constitutes a reasonable risk where like this is unacceptable and like can't be done?
I believe
What
if you
percentage
have,
of the population?
I mean, I can just kind of give my I guess I can give my stance. I would have to look up some stuff to send it back to you, but for me personally, if you have 3 concussions within a 2-year period, I think it should be pulled out of the sport, period, regardless of where
No,
you
I don't-
receive them.
I
That's
don't
where
mean
I'm
at
at
an
for it.
individual level. I don't mean at an individual
No,
level.
that's not
I mean,
even
like,
that's not even an individual. I want that in the state of New Jersey, period. And I want
No,
that
no, no. What-
across, like,
That's not what I'm asking. Maybe
Sure.
I'm wording it properly.
You got it.
What I'm saying is, what percentage of all people that play football would have to be subjected to multiple concussions for you to be like, this is an unreasonable risk that we have to shut down? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Like, what is the percentage where where you've passed that threshold of like, now it is unreasonable for you to be subjecting children to this until this is fixed?
I don't want to participate in this hypothetical, but it's because hypothetical frames it like there isn't, like, it's unaware that these things aren't happening and they're trying to make the game safer, because we are trying to make the game safer at the high school level. So like in a situation, if I was in like
We're doing an
1997,
we're trying to do like an actual risk assessment here, right? Like,
Right,
what
and I'm
is
saying-
too risky to put your kids in.
right, and I'm saying fuck the risk assessment, because we understand what the risks are and that we should probably try to work towards, because we see the measures of making the sport safer and what it's creating. Like having better helmets for people to wear, having better fields to people to play on, having better protocols for concussions, and not this 5-day bullshit where after 5 days you can return for a game. Like we can make the
I'd say
game
10.
safer.
But see, like if I had a sport
10%?
that was played in Hawaii, right?
Okay.
And the sport was people ride 4-wheelers over hot lava and 90% of people die from it, but 10% survive and we really like it. Saying, well, no, we're aware of the risks and we're putting flame retardant suits on people is not an appropriate fucking answer. My question is, how many people, what percentage of people have multiple traumatic brain injuries before you're like, we got to shut this shit down until we get that rate lower?
What I want to shut down is kickoffs at the high school level. I want to shut down using your equipment as a weapon. So whether it be your shoulder pads or your helmet, which started from the helmet and now we got to get to the shoulder pad. I want to shut down contact to 15 minutes per week during the season and then 30 minutes during the preseason. These are the things I want to shut down.
Yeah,
I
Those
also
are great things to make it better, but that doesn't answer the question.
I'll answer your question if it makes you like I think if we had a number where like 1 or 2 in 10 kids was like if you played football like within that season was going to have some type of concussion, I think that would be a massive problem. Like I said, I've never even had a headache.
It's 1 in 5 are the concussion rates for high school people per season.
No, it's not 1 in 5.
Okay.
That's not 1 in 5.
It's less than 1%.
It's
1% ever.
It's 99,000 out of the entirety of high school players. 99,000 have received concussions.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so you're saying
99,036.
99,000 have reported concussions, right? So what is the actual prevalence rate?
And just
are
to
we doing
clarify,
with, like,
this
conspiracy?
this doesn't take into account that some states don't report concussions as well. Like, is it safe to assume that concussions are underreported?
Which state does not report concussions?
State like hold
Joe
on.
just
Let's
said
just
that he doesn't.
no. Let's just like actually tell the truth here. That the only way for a student to be like seen in terms of an injury, if there's reason to assume that the student is injured, and Bam knows exactly what I'm talking about. If he played football, where that there are players who are clearly injured, we know that they're injured, but they played through it for whatever reason. And on top of that, because of certain regulations that parents are allowed to do, then we're not able to find out that these students are injured before it's too late. So all of a sudden, you might just be playing in a non-contact, and then your leg just stops working, and then you find out that I pulled it, and then you find out, well, actually you tore your ACL, and you thought it was just a sprain, or you have a situation where like I thought I had a broken finger and there's a strain, sorry, my finger was strained. Turns out it was a broken finger. Like
Joe,
these things have to be reported.
That's what happened to me. I was in a military competition. It was called the Best Warrior competition. And I was doing night land nav, and I was running, and what I thought was a swamp turned out what I thought was flat land turned out to be a swamp. And so I actually ended up hyperextending my knee. And so I just thought my knee hurt. I thought like I pulled a muscle or whatever. I was in the lead of the competition. I'm typically very competitive. So I continued to compete. I did combatives with a hyperextended knee, and I did a 10K ruck march with a hyperextended knee. Well, it turns out later on that after my sponsor figured I was injured, and I told him I was going to keep competing. He told me to go see the medic immediately after the competition, and I went to see the medic, and now I have chronic knee tendonitis in my right knee for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I mean,
there is injuries that like you'll play through because you think you're fine, but it leads to lifelong circumstances because you thought you were fine when you really weren't. And so I think it's why it's always important to take it out of the player's hands and give it to a professional as to whether or not that person goes back to the field. Take it out of the player's hands.
Take it out of players' hands. Take it out of coaches. Take it out of parents.
I'm finding a lot of fucking
I just want to
different stats here.
So like Twitter, then
it's a lot of conflicting data.
A lot of conflicting, right? So here's one from ABC News. A recent study found that 47% of high school football players suffered a concussion each season, according to stats gathered by the National Center for Injury Prevention. The problem is the news, even though it's ABC, doesn't actually link the study.
The source, awful reporting.
Right here, UPMC, 2 out of 10 high school athletes who play contact sports will get a concussion this year. I mean, some of these are scary. Like if it's truly 47%, if 47% of football players in high school are getting a concussion for each season, that can't be allowed anymore.
This is from the American.
This is equivalent to saying 50% of people who participate in band go deaf. Like I have hearing loss. Like that's ridiculously high.
This study is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And they state that only in the season of 2018 to 2019, only 99,036 players of high school football received concussions. And in that same year, according to Statista, the 2018-2019 season, there was 1,008,417 people who played football in the season of 2018, 2019. You
So
talk about
10%.
99,000. So
That's like
10,
10%.
10,
Hold on. So this
10%
is from
of
this-
10%
this-
of players.
This is from the CDC. In 2019, about 15% of all high school students self-reported one or more sports or recreation-related concussions within the preceding 12
So
months.
what year is
Exceeds your
that?
threshold,
So,
Blacktoid.
wait. So what part? So is that all sports?
Yeah,
Yes.
so 15%
Okay.
of all high school students self-reported one or more sports or recreation-related concussions within the preceding 12 months. And my understanding is high school generally is a higher risk of concussion than other sports. So it would go to reason that probably a higher percentage than 15% of high school football players get a concussion within the last 12 months, right?
It's pretty easy to tell if you
AAP.
have a concussion or not. I could tell fairly well when I got concussed that I was concussed. I could have sworn up and down the balls were going through my racket. I actually ended the match. I was playing doubles, and I looked at my teammate. I said, "Listen, I'm done." And he's like, "No, we got to play through it." I'm like, I'm concussed. I need to get off the court." So we went up to the net. We shook hands. We said, "Hey, I'm
What's
concussed."
that have to do with the prevalence rate?
So what I'm stating is that it's fairly. So what Lactoid is saying is that this isn't including people that don't know they're concussed. And what I'm stating from personal experience is that you know when you're concussed. If you're concussed, you know that you know the fact that you're
Hold on.
concussed.
Let me read it.
Saying.
Yeah, let me read it one more time.
I don't.
Okay,
I don't
okay.
buy this 15% number.
yeah. So this is not even including people who don't know that they're concussed. Okay, this is
Okay.
in 2019. About 15% of all U.S. high school students self-reported.
Yes,
one or
but you just
more-
went further than that to say that people didn't know they were concussed, and that should make that number bigger.
No. What I said is that. So hold on. So
Will you stop obfuscating and just listen?
You're
No, I'm
misunderstanding-
stating what he
you're
stated last time.
No, you're misunderstanding, right? So
Okay, so then
So
please.
I'll read the
inform
whole
me.
thing one more time. In 2019, this is according to the CDC, 15% of all U.S. high school students self-reported one or more sports or recreation-related concussions within the preceding 12 months. That's all
Okay.
sports, okay? Now, among sports, am I incorrect in believing that football has a higher concussion rate than, let's say, tennis or
Yes,
lacrosse?
football is a higher.
Football
That's
is
a
not
miss.
high
That's
school.
miss.
Right.
That's
And
that's
so-
miss. That's
Tennis is
misleading
not.
because
Tennis
then
is not.
the pro-
Tennis is not
All
a
right.
contact sport.
All right,
Like,
I'm
I-
trying
I-
to-
I
I'm
confuse-
trying to
no.
gen-
So if you follow the logic tree here, then
It's
it would
higher in
it-
football.
yeah,
My
it
nigga,
would seem-
fuck a
it would- it would-
logic
it would
tree. What
seem-
are we
it
doing?
would seem
It's
to be-
debate
hold on,
brain
it-
shit, bro.
No, it
Come
would
on.
seem to reason intuitively.
fuck,
Hold
man.
on, it would seem to reason intuitively that like the low concussion rates of lacrosse or basketball and stuff would be dropping the percentage, probably
Yeah, when
lower
you-
than 15%.
when you take into
but then
account
the football percent
non-contact
would be higher.
sports.
Yeah. So
So it seems to
so-
reason. It also seems to reason that when you take into account wrestling versus tennis, people who wrestle would get more concussions than people who play tennis. You're
right.
comparing, but the thing is, you're comparing contact sports versus non-contact sports. Yes,
We have
is
to
it possible in a
be-
non-contact sport to get a concussion? Yes, it's possible in a non-contact sport to get a concussion. But when you compare a
You're
contact
making his
sport versus a
point for him,
contact sport,
Lactoid. You're making his point for him. I don't think. you
Okay,
agree
so
on it.
Sprout,
all right,
yeah.
all
So
right,
it's higher.
so-
So it's reasonable to assume here that it's higher than
It's higher than 15.
No,
And-
I'm saying
and
that's
for
not
me, the
reasonable.
cutoff-
This
That's
is
what I'm
okay.
getting
All right.
around.
I'm gonna fanatic my way through this. I'm gonna fanatic my way through this because holy fucking shit. We can recognize that the data needs to be expanded dramatically. There also needs to be data disaggregation because Lactoid, your stance is retarded. Because the reason why it's retarded, and I'll walk it through you like you're a 5-year-old, is that we need to be more specific about when these concussions happen and where these concussions happen. Just making this broad claim of 15%, whether it be 10 or 5, is not good enough and not a good enough bar. We need to disaggregate the data to see why these individuals are getting injured. Bam knows as well as I do that one of the most dangerous places in the football field is the practice field. It's not the main field. And the biggest thing that concerns me is that a lot of these things, especially things like concussions and leg injuries, are happening for football players in practice, which is why I'm even advocating for the limitation of live contact, whether it be tackling or thudding during practice, because we recognize where these risks happen. We can make practice safer for players and put them in a better environment so that they can actually play the sport in long form instead of getting blasted during a practice and getting outed for 2 to 3 weeks at a time.
And Joe,
You're
if
not
you
arguing the point.
yeah,
You're
if you
fucking
I'm not
obfuscating.
engaging with the point because it's retarded.
No, because you don't want to admit that it has a lot of dangers.
No, I'm saying
I
no.
don't-
I'm
I don't
disagreeing
think-
with the point. I'm saying that you're like, again, that we would just need better data on this. But if you're telling me that
This
you're
is
telling
the
me that 7 and
CDC.
10,
Yeah,
I'm telling you that cannot be trusted.
Well,
the idea that you're
no,
saying
okay.
2 and 10, 7 and
I
10,
just-
4 and 10.
We
like,
need
that's
data
not realistic.
disaggregation.
Doesn't-
We need data.
I'm just-
Okay, all
we're
right. I'm just
gonna
gonna make a statement. If you agree or disagree, we can move on with that. We need data disaggregation when it comes to how high school players are getting injured. This includes concussions. Do you agree or
But-
disagree with
so-
that statement?
Well, I
Corey,
want
Corey, Corey, Corey.
I
I would
agree.
need-
I
Corey,
agree with that, Joe.
Corey,
But
it's
my-
not- I wanna hear-
it's the
my-
part
I
of
want to
this.
hear from
We're
Corey. I want to
talking
hear from
about
Corey.
questions.
I want to hear.
One second, my study-
Hey. Corey,
Cowards. A bunch
Corey,
of
please.
cowards running
Nigga,
from the
suck
argument.
my
Cor-
dick.
You're a fucking
Like,
idiot.
fuck you.
So,
Hey, guys, shut up. Corey,
Coward.
shut up. I want to hear from Corey. He's been waiting quite a bit. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, this is on the same. I just wanted to ask, hopefully, a simple question in terms of like, Joe, would you agree or not, at least based off of everything that's been outlined, that regardless of sport, like the rate of concussions is underreported? Would you agree with that statement?
Of course I do, which is why one of the things I also advocate for is the mandatory health evaluations of high school students before they're able to start for a game. So if Bam, for instance, wants to start on Friday, he has to get a positive health evaluation on Thursday in order to play. If he does not get that or refuses to get that, he is not allowed to start, period. That's one of my advocacy points and something
Right.
that even, but yeah, yes,
So-
of course.
Yeah, but so if you agree with that, and maybe like you just don't, your threshold is just so high but based off what Lactoid outlined, like even just to me on the surface, like the data they outlined is pretty startling. And if you would agree that that's
What
an
frustrates me.
that's an
Well, my-
underreportment.
Hold on, Corey.
But Corey, my
let
study-
let Corey get through it.
So like if you agree yourself that's an underreporting, even based off of what I would say lactoid startling data, like maybe this might be futile, but like to what Scott was trying to do earlier, like is there any threshold at all? Like so it seems like pretty much the banning of football for children is like
Yeah, he
off
just
the table.
refuses
I will-
It's a non-starter.
my
Wait, who-
study
is this-
my
oh,
study
this
is
is a-
my study is actually disaggregated. So when we take a look at my study
it's
versus
not, though.
lactoids, but it is
It's
disaggregated.
not.
No, can you give me a second? Because it is. If you let me explain, then maybe you'd realize it is. So my study is disaggregated completely to football. Lactoid study is not disaggregated completely to football.
No.
Lactoid study is about all high school sports, and he's trying to make the assumption that my study is wrong based off his study of all high school
No.
sports.
No,
Yes.
it's still underreported
Football
because
has the highest rate. What are you talking about? It doesn't
It is
matter.
Rugby.
it is still underreported, as in regardless of your study, like unless they're doing like a thorough assessment, like I haven't read it, so I'm open to being wrong, but unless they're doing a thorough assessment of every single high school player and like assessing them after each game, like the guiding principle is still the same, as in like pretty much like no matter what, the rate of concussion that's reported, it's an underreporting of the actual number.
When
I
you
know,
are
so
concussion-
I'm
when
kind
you-
of, I
when you- when you-
understand.
when you are
Somebody address me.
I
please.
under. Go for it,
That's
man.
all I'm begging for that. I'm saying, could we keep going on with like I'm assuming that his number is extremely wrong. That's the assumption.
And I'd agree
There-
with that.
Why?
because I'm
Because,
I'm
okay,
not one that I have football experience with football. You're like you're giving me numbers that are like on their face.
Have experience with
On their,
football.
no, but
okay,
I'm saying
no, I want to. Okay, so I'm with. No. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up.
Oh,
Let Bam go.
no. We'll get Bam. Get your point out, Joe.
Yeah.
Don't worry. We'll let you have the floor again.
Like you're saying something that's obviously not true. You're telling me that 20% of people on a team of 50, let's see, what number is that? Was that 10 people are have concussions over a season? I'm saying like I deal with high schools this number is just on its face ridiculous. Again, and I keep bringing it up. And people keep being pissed off. It will be equivalent to me saying something like 60% of children that participate in band have hearing loss. Like on the face value of that, like I don't have to look up the study to know that like that number just sounds like something that somebody pulled out of the butt. That like I'm disagreeing with that at its face.
Well,
I'm saying
you're
that
right.
20% of children don't experience concussions over a season.
You're
Like,
right.
the-
and
You're right.
I've seen data literally as low as like less than 1% of high schoolers ever experience a concussion in their career. So that's why I'm saying that
can't be right.
I can-
You're just picking the science.
no,
No,
I'm
no,
not.
according-
no, 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 no,
I'm saying
no. I
that
ban.
the data
According to
isn't
the same
thorough.
study,
I don't-
according to the same study,
is wrong because I know.
No, I'm saying that
according
there's
to the
No.
same. No,
saying
Wait,
he's
ba-
right.
hold on,
Let
Bam,
me
hang on,
back
hang
him
on.
up.
Let
Let
me
me back
no,
him
hold
up.
on, hold
Let
on,
me back
Sprout,
him up. I literally have
hang on,
statistical
hang on,
data.
hang on. Fuck the data. We can recognize why Bam is frustrated because I'm probably frustrated for the same reason. Okay, so if you come to me and say 15% of high school players are having concussions, I go, wow, that's really crazy. And then the next line is, well, let's disaggregate the data. Why are these kids getting concussed? And then we can look to every single sport and see why these concussions happen. And then, okay, if we go to football, and if you show me definitively, hey, in football, there's 15% of people getting concussed. My first response is not to ban that outright. The data doesn't stop when I think it's just enough to ban the thing. The next line of questioning is, okay, how are these individuals getting injured? And one of the things I'm trying to lay it out here, I'm trying to do it to the best of my ability, but apparently it's a little bit challenging because I know sometimes when I talk, people think I'm retarded, so they think I just go and be pedantic and semantic. So I'll be a bit more clear here. I want to know why high school athletes are getting concussed in the settings that they're getting concussed and in the context that they're concussed. And if you can show me that, hey, 15% of X players are getting concussed for this reason and this activity in this particular portion of the activity, then yeah, we can ban that point outright, which is why I want to ban kickoffs.
So,
Can
I please?
Yeah.
Can I please?
She was that good to me.
I've been trying to say this for like 5
Spartacus,
minutes.
get your point now. I do want to engage with Joe's point here. Joe's feels like his point's been lost, so I want to engage with that. But Spartacus, go ahead, get your point out. And don't worry.
It's going to include what Bam and Joe both said. So, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, high school had a concussion rate of 10.4 per 10,000 athlete exposures. So the rate during practice was 5.01 per 10,000 athlete exposures, compared with the competition concussion rate of 35.82 per 10,000 athlete exposures. So overall, football had a concussion rate of 10.4 per 10,000 exposures. This goes towards what Joe is saying when he says he wants it to be aggregated. This study is aggregated. And this goes towards what Bam is saying, to where it is not 20%. It is 10.4 per 10,000.
Which would equate to what, 1%?
Yes.
That's one, and I don't even know if that number's right. I'm just saying that like these numbers are so across the board, and the 15% when it just is ridiculous. I think 1% is also probably ridiculous.
That's
10
not
and
1%.
It's a rate. It's like to convert
It's
that
a
to
rate per every single practice. That is the chance that you will get a concussion on one day of practice.
On one day of practice, hold on. Let's pull that back, because how much time would you want then? How much time would you want? Is 15 minutes per week too much for you?
No, I'm not going to go further and further down when you're trying to run away from the argument.
Is 15 minutes of tackling and thudding per week, is that too much for you? During practice. So during an entire week of practice, you're only allowed
Hey, stop it. Look, okay, you had the floor. I want to give Scott the floor. Lactoid is waiting though. Lactoid, I want to get Lactoid's point. And Joe, I'm going to engage with your point here because I think you have an interesting point. I really want to focus it. So don't worry, we're going to get to that. But Scott, respond how you want to respond, then Lactoid, and then I really want to engage with what Joe is trying to say.
My response is that there are things that you can do to make it better. But if you want to start trying to obfuscate and run away from the question and move over to like specific training techniques, etc., because you don't want to talk about the prevalence rate of concussions in the population, and then you want to deny any data that doesn't match with your anecdotal experience, then I don't give a fuck about you not having the data available of prevalence rates with certain techniques versus other techniques. I'm okay with making it better, But the problem is what is the prevalent rate of concussions? And if the prevalence rate of concussions is such that 10, 15, 20% of people are getting a fucking concussion every season, and then you reiterate that towards multiple seasons, you have a very large percentage of people that are getting long-term damaging traumatic brain injuries that can lead to horrible fucking things. And we can get into aggregating, figuring out what those things are, reducing those until it's at an acceptable rate. But you're going towards the things we can do to reduce the rate while ignoring the rate because me love football and you're not allowed to talk shit on football. And it's bullshit and it's cowardly.
He's
Okay.
going towards
Can I-
my
may
rate.
I- may I address it, Prime, or do you wanna
I
do your
promise.
thing?
We just want to get to lacto.
Sure.
You're going to have that spot. Lactoid.
So I mean, okay. Just because Joe was specifically referred to, Joe, if you want to swap places and I'll go after you, I can do that if you want.
Okay.
I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that. What I want is an expand, and this is probably the lactose. Listen, I use the R word a lot there. I got a little heated there. Sorry about that, lactose and Corey. Usually I'm on Corey's side here. We're on opposite sides. It's fun. This is
We're
what
still
is what I want, to be very direct here, because apparently me love football. Whatever. Fucking. All right. So I want the expansion of research on concussions. I also want the expansion of health procedures around concussions and around contact sports, period. I want both happening at the same time because we understand that the sport is not going to stop. We understand that the sport is not going to stop. I'll say it one more time for those people in the back of the room who are, we don't want to stop me. We hate football. You can't stop football. So what you have to do is make sure that you're putting students in a position to be safe when they're participating in this activity. This is why I want the expansion of research while limiting the time of tackling and thudding. I want the expansion of research while we had the mandatory screenings of players on Thursdays or Friday, depending on the game for participation. This is why I want the mandatory 2 concussion rule. If you have 2 concussions in a 2-year period when you're in high school, you're out of the sport altogether. Like, these are things that I want, all the while the expansion of research. That way, it makes people's arguments of like, hey, I want to ban football in certain aspects stronger. But again, like, I also want, while we're walking and chewing gum at the same time and expanding concussion research and expanding how hits cause certain injuries, I want certain things that we know cause harm out of the game. I want kickoffs out. I want using your equipment as a weapon penalized so hard to the point that it's fining or pulling the kid out of your program. Like, I want to make something that's incredibly clear. I love football, but I'm way more authoritarian than I think even Bam is. I'm USADA on steroids. I like, there's so many regulations that I want for that sport that every single like beer drinking, loving, tooting American would call it the PFL, the Pussy Football League. But listen, if all those pussies don't get brain injuries, I'm for it, man. If they don't get torn ACLs and MCLs and weird injuries, or they don't walk straight, or they look like Brett Favre and don't remember what they do in their own fucking state, I'm for it, you know?
Okay. So
Right, so you didn't answer.
let me just okay.
That's right. Walk away. Walk away, pussy.
Joe,
It's all good.
Joe, I don't know what point you think I was trying to make. I feel as though a lot of the time here that we spent, the risk of concussion has been in debate, and some sides have been saying it's not that big of a deal, they kind of downplaying it. Some sides have been saying it's a big deal, and I think this may just be an empirically driven question because I was looking at the CDC. I actually found the full study, and I've been reading through it. It's very interesting because the 15% includes physical activities among high schoolers that includes sports teams, but also includes things like skateboarding and other kind of high risk activities. So I was like, okay, maybe that stuff is like raising the percentage injured. But actually, if you limit the study group to just people who play specifically on sports teams, the rates of concussion go up. So if any high schooler who plays on a sports team has a risk of concussion if you play on one sports team, of 16.7%, a risk of concussion. If you play on 2 sports teams, that goes up to 22.9%. If you play on 3 sports teams, that goes up to 30.3%. If you play on none, it's I think down below 3%. So
Factoid.
it seems to me that playing in a team sport does carry a risk of concussion. Now, Sprout, I know you're saying that your study shows that these concussions may not
I
cause
understand
CTE later, and that's perfectly valid when we're talking about the risks here. But what Scott asks was maybe not necessarily having to do with CTE, but if the risk of concussion among
I'm
high
not
school
talking
students
about
is this
CTE.
high, no. So CTE is one thing, but there's also
I'm not talking about CTE.
okay.
You
do you think
assumed
that
I was going to talk about something that I
finish
wasn't
it-
going to
do you-
talk about.
finish up what you got, Lacto?
Yeah. Do you think a
Okay.
16 just for playing on one sports team, which I mean that includes all sports teams, including things like tennis and lacrosse. So I assume
Mhm.
that for football it's likely higher than 16.7%, but we can even run with 16.7%. Do you think 16.7% is an acceptable threshold for people getting concussions?
I need more than just the 16%.
I
personally.
don't think 16.7% is the threshold for concussions.
What threshold do you have?
Again, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, they took account of 4 different football seasons, 2013 to 2018. 4,183 concussions were suffered by high school football players. The football had a rate of 10.4 per 10,000 athlete exposures. An athlete exposure is an injury of any type. So 10.4 per 10,000 injuries by athletes, because this is where the pediatrics would come in. 10.4 per 10,000 injuries of any athlete was a concussion that happened in football. And so no, I would say that 16% is too high. I would say that this is more aggregated. You are making assumptions based off of data that isn't aggregated. You are trying to push that data to say that it is aggregated, so therefore we have to actually debate against it. Whereas my data is actually aggregated, and it seems to be that both you and Scott don't actually want to argue against my data. You just want to try and push your data and say it's aggregated and try to push that and say, well, there's no way it could be that because look at this percentage. When you're actually not actually willing to debate the actual data that is in front of
Can
your
I ask
face.
a clarifying
No,
question?
real quick.
Yeah, please.
You lied. You lied real quick. Athlete exposure is, quote, a unit of susceptibility to injury. It is not 10 per 10,000 injuries that are concussions. It's every time you are susceptible
It's
to an injury,
10.4
which is every
football
game,
concussions.
every practice, every time you go to the gym to go lift weights as a form of practice, every time you go to the field, every time you're doing tackling training, etc. So it's not 10 per 10,000 injuries.
Okay.
It's
Your
per
stat,
sus-
Sprout, your
unit of
stat is not
susceptibility
relevant
to
Okay.
injury.
to Lactoid's
I
data.
still can't talk.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so Lactoid, I think I'm understanding what you're throwing here. And maybe we're throwing the same
Yeah, well,
maybe we're throwing on the same ball here. All right, yeah, run away, you fucking pussy ass bitch. So like I think a big thing here for me, and maybe this
will
will
you stop
answer
calling me
your
a pussy when you're the one that won't answer fucking rates of susceptibility?
PUSSYBITCH. So I think one of the things that gets
This is
kind of
what
missed.
people
I
do
think
when they
one.
have no argument.
I'm just talking to Lactoid, but apparently it can't happen. But okay, he's gone now. But he has those Bluetooth headphones, so he's probably still hearing me. Whatever, gamers, am I right? So one of the things that maybe I can connect the dots here, but when I ask this definitively, right, just to make sure I'm understanding where you're coming from. So was your frustration and kind of what I was engaging with in terms of the percentage of players concussed as it relates to football, or do you want to like re-ask that question one more time?
Yeah, I mean, so my only concern here is, so if a high enough percentage of kids are getting injured doing this thing, and
Mhm.
especially if this injury is a concussion, I become less and less okay with it.
Gotcha.
And especially because they can't consent to that risk. And so if what I'm looking at right here, I'm reading right off the CDC website, among students who played on 1, 2, and 3 or more sports teams, the prevalence of reporting having at least one concussion was 16.7%, 22.9%, and 30.3%, respectively, table 2. If it's true that if I'm going to go play in a sports team, I have a 16.2% chance of getting a concussion as a minor, that's deeply concerning, and that needs to be taken seriously. And that's only
Gotcha.
reported, by the way.
And it's probably underreported.
Okay,
if
so
it was 16%, I would agree, but I don't know.
Yeah, I see the ball that you're throwing. So and maybe we agree on this, and maybe that's why this is getting so strange, is that the thing that I want and the thing that I'm sort of demanding is an analysis of the areas of activity. So
Which is
if
fair.
Yeah. So like because basically this is what I hear, and maybe Bam hears this too. Like 15% of players are concussed, and then it's like, wow, that's a really, maybe I've reiterated this before, but I'll make it as clear as I can this time. Like, wow, that's a really high number. But when I'm looking at it in football, is that I'm concerned of the areas of activity where they're happening. So like if you came to me, that's like 15% of players are getting concussed, and then additionally within the aggregate of football, there are 15% of players getting concussed, but also there's 50% of players who are experiencing this during kickoffs. And then it's like, okay, let's approach what's going on in kickoffs. But then, like, if we look across all areas of activity, and all of these are higher than, if you want a number from me, I'd say 15% across all of these areas of activity. And just so I'm clear, because people don't understand what the fuck that means by areas of activity in sports, I'm talking about offense as opposed to an offensive player getting concussed, a defensive player getting concussed, a kickoff receiving team player getting concussed, and a kickoff returning team getting concussed. And if all areas of those are 15% or greater, then that would be something where we would strongly consider reevaluating.
Joe,
if I may.
can I say one more thing real quick? Because it's directly in response to that. I have a proclivity to want to allow this because full disclosure, I am a football fan. I like football. It's fun, right? It's fun to watch. And I think it's good exercise, and I think kids need to be exercising more.
Yes.
If what you do works, like if we do this full analysis and like, hey, we can get like the rate down below 5% because we set up these special rules for like kickoffs and special teams, great. Like that is the most preferable outcome. But the fact that right now we're sitting on 16.7 at the very least means that we have a lot of work to do in getting that fucking number down, because that number is unacceptable. That number is
I'd agree with you.
Number.
Like,
that's the point.
like I mean, Bam is at the point of accepting numbers. Like I'm at the point of expansion of the research and the data, because again, like I've seen what these sports do to kids, and it's not very good. But I do recognize that like this is the risk that you do when it comes to physical activity, and we can make the sport safer while researching the areas of activity better, so we can have better data and information, so it's like we can approach this properly. Because again, like one of like which is kind of like the turf versus like grass argument for me in one aspect, is that like we see the injuries that happen on turf over and over and over, and that's even something that even at the high school level is underreported. And I can't imagine, like, I mean, like I see what happens in the NFL, where it's like, yeah, like we should probably switch to grass now. And this whole like liberal initiative of like turf is the way to go for multi-access and multi-use of fields, and it's like, come on, who are we lying to? Why are we lying to ourselves like that? But with that being said, to read back to the point, because again, I guess we're in agreement here, and some level of agreement, where it's like 15% is high. I want to see the data distribution across all areas of activity before I want to like evaluate like how we do like sort of the more authoritarian thing of pulling kids out or banning it outright, that type of shit.
I know Corey wants to go. Okay, you can go. No, I'll go.
I'm going to try being quick. And maybe just to throw an olive branch to you, Joe, because despite maybe the disagreement, I still love you. Like I can see how there's maybe a diluted version of football that can exist, that children can play, that results in pretty much like very minimal risk of concussion. I have no problem that might be an option. I would just say that, you know, I don't know that I want to run the experiment of like, oh, implement this safety measure, and then let's track the data, and turns out there's minimal effect, and then let's make this little tweak, and then track. You know, we're gonna go through iterative generations of kids running this experiment as like I'm trying to play the safest of, like, you know, there's probably way more other sports. As someone who is highly physically active myself, of like there's so many other sports that children can play that just don't pose this risk of injury.
Like soccer.
And I'm an accelerationist. I don't want to be the incremented like check the data. I want to like hit this hammer hard right from the jump. So that's why it's like I'm not of this like ban kickoffs and then double check. I'm like, no, ban kickoffs and don't return them. Ban punt returns at certain levels of the field and don't return them. Like ban and this is where probably Bam and I would probably argue about it, where it's like, hey, ban the use of your body as a weapon and make it very clear what that means of using your body as a weapon. So like leading with your shoulder.
Scott, I want to.
Yeah, and the beat.
Scott, I wanted to.
I thought Bam needed to go.
Sorry, what?
It's Prime's panel, but I do want to say something.
Well, I know
Oh, you
Bam has really been waiting to speak.
Okay. All right. All right. That's fine. Whatever. Go ahead, Spam.
Okay, yeah, I really didn't want to take over. Just something else that's interesting I found in that is that women's sports are actually like overall more likely to cause concussions, but men football like has so many members that football has, like men has a higher rate of concussion, and it's just because of one, like I said, one, the level of contact, and two, the number of members participating in it. But I guess because of the way women's bodies are, they have higher rates of concussions in basically every other sport, which is probably also plays into the data of concussion.
Well, I think
like aggregated all.
we also Saw that
But
over
nobody's
time
trying to
the
ban these other sports. Like no one's mentioned banning women's tennis or soccer or volleyball.
I mean, I haven't mentioned banning football either.
Well, I mean, we
said that
haven't pointed out the problem of it either. And I'm not talking about on this panel. I'm saying like societally. Like I think people have a personal issue with football and football players.
I think they have a personal issue when it comes to football and concussions because probably media attention of CTE, but also because the rates are so much higher.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's not. It's the
like,
number of
you know
players.
what I mean? It's like the nail that sticks up is, gets hammered down hardest, right? Like we could talk about soccer, which I think is number 2, but no one talks about soccer because football's the one that is in the media attention, right? We could talk about like Muay Thai or like Taekwondo and like whether or not it should be banned that you're allowed to kick heads, but like the rates are lower in terms of like the rates are actually higher in if you allow head kicks.
The highest sport in high school boys is actually wrestling, which I wrestled too in high school. But again, just it's the number.
What I was going to say is that when we look at the AAP's data in terms of per athlete exposure, it's actually gone up in games and gone down in training, which might be because we've restricted tackling training. And because of that, they're not tackling as properly. And so during the game where they go full force, they might be getting injured more. We don't really know. But that also could be a factor in what you're saying in terms of like other things is technical ability could lead to less injuries. And, females may not have as much technical capability in terms of the sports that they're playing. But it's probably, we'd have to dig and parse that data out. There's a lot of factors.
Yeah. Basically.
Joe,
I get real personal about my sport.
Like for instance, Lactoid, like I'm like when it comes to certain running drills in practice and practices, I'm already there of limiting that, right? Because like I'm so sensitive about ACL tears and MCL tears. So that's like another thing in terms of like contact that I want to expand. And that's where Bam and I probably disagree because I consider running contact. So it's like
so Joe, but here's my concern, right? So
and they're at to be clear, I say that because we're at the 15 to 20% of like games played where there's ACL tears. Like it's too high.
So you bring that up.
It's not contact. But okay.
Right, but
I consider running contact.
Okay, so you bring up the ACL.
It's not two human bodies.
All right. I want to talk to Lactoid now. Thanks.
It doesn't matter. It's an injury while playing the sport. Okay, so I told you the stats on the concussions that I've been reading. You're talking about ACL tears and all the various other injuries that can happen. I'm glad that you want to reform this. And where I'm sitting now is it should be reformed. But as it stands right now, absent this reformation, if I'm a parent and I'm going to choose whether or not to allow my kid to participate in this stuff, unless these changes happen, how can I in good conscience send my kid into something where they have an unacceptably high % chance of a concussion, of an ACL tear, of other injuries when they're my kid and I'm responsible for their safety?
Yeah, that's a great point because I want to ban contact from 8th grade down. I want it to be like that. That's just where I'm at. Where the only like limitation, if people aren't down, because I know there's somebody in the sports world that's like, what the fuck is Joe talking about? How are they going to learn how to tackle? You can still have thudding, my guy. Like, relax. Where like my big thing is making sure that children and young adults are learning how to tackle properly. And when you have any type of vehicle where their body can be used as a weapon, they're going to use it as a weapon in context. They're going to use it as a weapon in terms of retaliation. They're going to use it in terms of means of defense. Because like I've seen this happen in real time. Like you'll have like somebody who just like hits you on one play a little weird, and then the next play you knock them out of the game. And that's like not something that I want. I want to take that out of the culture of contact sports, and specifically in football. And I think the only way to do that from like 8th grade down is to ban tackling, period. And then when they're finally in a regulatory environment, because youth sports aren't regulated, then you can finally do things at the high school level where it's regulated in a way that's safe, which incentivizes
Sure.
coaches to properly teach these things. And this is already happening. Obviously, in youth sports, it's going to be a little bit more challenging because this is way unregulated over there. But
No, let me be
Sure,
clear.
Joe,
I'm
talk-
talking
we-
about
we
high
can-
school students. I'm talking about like
Sure.
if I had a kid who was in high school and they came up to me and were like, "Dad, can I play football?" I can't see how I could say yes, looking at the data as it
Well,
stands now.
Well,
Why? So why?
I'd say yes. Like I would say yes, and here's why I would say yes: is because I am not retarded. I like if I'm going to put my student into I'm going to put my child into an activity, and I'm going to treat that activity with seriousness and care. I'm going to have a conscious, dedicated effort to know that sport better than them walking into it. So if they want to play football, I'm going to be like, okay, what do you want to do as far as the sport is concerned? So if my child has an interest in football, it's not you playing football isn't the be all end all of playing football. So if my child wants to say like if he's a wide receiver and he's not cutting it, you can laugh. Like you can laugh if you want at this, but
No,
I
I'm
think
laughing
the-
at what you said before. Like
yeah.
I would because I am not. It's like
Well, yeah. Well, like,
I don't think I am either.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. Like, but I guess like the frustration that I have, and this is why I said I'm not retarded, is that a lot of parents will put their children into an activity and just think that putting their student into the activity is enough for them to be engaged and enough for them kind of like as a pseudo babysitter. Where I'm at the point where I want parents to be actively involved in the activities that they're putting their children in so they can understand what's happening to their children in real time. So like for me as a parent, if I know my son is concussed and I know the signs of concussion and my son says, "Dad, I'm good, I feel good, it's just my back," I'm like, "My nigga, get in the car, we're going the fuck home." And I'm gonna tell the coach, "You better not start his ass. If I start his ass, we're gonna have a fucking problem." I don't care if he's a star.
He's already concussed, and if he tears his ACL, like he might say, "Look, I've turned from my ACL. Don't put me in." And I might be a great parent and say, like, "Yeah, I'm not going to put you back in," but you fucking your ACL's torn.
Yeah,
So are you against all sports? Like, are you gonna stop your kid from skateboarding? You're gonna stop your kid from mountain biking? Are you?
But,
like,
I guess
where do you draw the line to where you know what, this is too dangerous for my kid? I need to wrap him in bubble wrap and make sure that my kid has like limited to no risk of injury.
Yeah. So on a
At what point?
I would treat it. Yeah. So what I would do is on a case by case basis, like take a look at this. How dangerous is this, right? And if it's within acceptable risk levels for me as a parent, I would.
Right. Where's
be like,
that risk
yeah.
level? Where
So-
where's
wait, wait, so
what line?
the question I have-
So I don't know I haven't sat down and thought about it for every single
Yeah.
activity where the exact
Oh,
line
you
is.
fence
I
sitter, plant your flag.
I do know. I plant this flag. I do know that if my kid came to me and wanted to engage in an activity, which they were 16.7% likely to get a concussion, and somewhat like what you're saying, Joe, like had like some percentage chance, like you think he said we're 20 or something, could be around there, percentage chance of like an ACL tear or something along these lines that causes like severe injury. I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say
what
I
if
think
what if
I
you
come
honestly-
back to me with a
what if
lower
your-
number.
Yeah,
What if
I mean,
your
I'll
kid-
come
what if your
back to you
kid
with
wanted to be the
I'll come
punter?
back to you with a lower number. The most least injured athletes that are in the NFL are kickers and punters. So there's other options on the field. When it
Yeah,
comes
if they want to be a
certain
kicker,
sports.
maybe I'll be okay with that. But a
Yeah, you can
linebacker,
say,
maybe
yeah,
not.
then that's an option as a parent. It's like, okay, you're gonna play football, okay, you're a kicker, and they're gonna be like, "Dad, what? I don't want to be a kicker." And it's like, my brother in Christ, do you want to make $6 to $10 million, or maybe really in the 2 to 3, kicking a ball for up to 20 years? and you
great.
can play
It
it
is
like,
crazy that they don't go
and
into being kickers. Like it's
yeah,
like, it's
well,
like a skill
well, yeah,
you can develop. You don't
With a
like,
swim
there's not
team,
really
that'd
a
be
talent
great.
in it.
right, yeah, but I'm saying
People
that's like,
drown. Let's look up the stats.
yeah.
Like,
Oh
so
my god.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm making,
Oh,
yeah,
no, no one
I'm making the
drowned.
kicker. I'm making the kicker argument
I'll look
because
up
like,
those stats.
yeah, the reason actually the reason why I make like the kicker argument, which is a half meme every time I use it, is that like one of the frustrations that I do have with sports is that parents are lied to, and that like you have to be playing football in order to be participating in football. For fuck's sake, Bill Belichick never played football. He
I'm
never
not,
played.
I'm not,
So
you're
he
missing
is
the point.
just a coach.
I'm not
So,
against
like-
football. I don't care if my kids want to be like a football
Yeah.
fan or want to go like sit in the fan, like watch games or do whatever the fuck ever, right? What I'm concerned about, what I think every parent should be concerned about, is whenever their kid comes to them and wants to do an activity, and like the risk is high. Like if your kid came to you and was like, "I want to go motocross racing," would you
I let
be
him go
like,
I teach
you
him how to
wouldn't care?
motocross. I teach like
I teach
it's
him how
my
to
duty.
motocross.
It's my, and this is a bit. This might be just a parenting difference. It's my
What if
duty
they're
as a
14?
parent.
What if they're 14 and they want to go
It's my-
motocross racing?
It's my duty as a parent to know the activity better than them, and I assume the risk with them. So I'm going to learn the sport with them. I'm going to learn the activity with them, because that's why I signed up for as a parent. It's not my job to say like, okay, you want to do motocross? All right, let's get you started. It's like, no, we're going to do this a responsible way so you can enjoy this activity. I'm going to be along the way with you the entire time, and we're going to do this together. That's just where I'm at in terms of parenting.
Yeah,
What if
my
I wanna-
14-year-old is not doing motocross.
Lactoid, would you be okay with your kid playing soccer?
If I would set the rule that was set for me, which is no headers whatsoever.
20% ACL tears, my friend.
Yeah,
soccer.
I have to
Soccer.
look at that. Yeah, I don't know.
Soccer has the second most concussions behind football. It has more ACL tears than football. So I'm curious on where exactly you're going to set this line, because it seems to be a line that's ever moving. So if they're not allowed to play soccer, then are they allowed? What sport are they allowed to play? What sport is safe enough for you to think that it's okay for them to have bubble wrap on, that they're going to be okay, and that, you know what, I'm going to wrap my kid in bubble wrap and make sure that they never get injured, even based off their own, even based on themselves, because you can even wait, please wait.
Let him finish.
You can go as far as to say mountain biking. There's plenty of injuries that happen in mountain biking because your bike will fall off the trail. That happens. It's happened to me multiple times. So you can say that, go as far as mountain biking. Like, what sport is safe enough for your kid?
Okay, so I am the only one so far that has been saying that I don't exactly know where the line is. Okay. You can create you can create absurdums that go one way, where you're saying, well, look at this sport like soccer or tennis, there's like, look at these risks, and I can agree, like obviously there's some threshold of risk that I would be not okay with, but there's also thresholds of risk that you would not be okay with. And I could ask you the same question: where's your line? Are you okay with your kid doing motocross?
Yeah,
they're 14. Are you okay with your kid doing fucking go-karting down the Grand Canyon with like a random bomb in their car that might go off in 30 seconds, but also might not, right? Like, you can set up any fucking crazy shit if you want to. There's risk for everything. I agree.
Shit. I'm bringing up statistics.
And I'm saying that at some point, like, I'm going to draw a line. And one of the lines here, it seems like football, from what I've been looking at and what Joe's been saying and what I've been looking at, fucking like concussion ratings and shit, that scares me. That is an uncomfortably high percentage. Are there other sports that may have a percentage that's not so uncomfortably high? Sure. I might look at that and I might say, I be careful. Like, I'm still going to be like there. I'm going to be watching. I'm going to like make sure you're not going to get hurt. But maybe it's not going to be so high that I'm not going to let you do it, because ultimately it's always going to be a call that the parent has to make.
And so to that point, Lacto, can I ask? So this addresses you and Sprouticus, and brings in Lacto. What are you saying? Like, would you be okay with your child Joe like free soloing? Same with you, Sprouticus, like free soloing. Okay.
Free soloing. I don't know what the hell that is.
I will never say no to my child in an activity they want to do for the betterment of themselves, because my job as a parent is to make sure they're a better individual than me. So like, if they want to do certain activities and certain sports that they feel that they just want to do because they love, I'm going to learn it with them 100%. I'm never going to put my child in a situation where I'm not within the activity with them.
You're
because as
gonna learn
much as
free
they
soloing with them.
Was that
So
like
what's free
skydiving?
soloing? Can someone explain? Can you
I
explain
know
to me,
what it
Corey?
is.
What's free
So
soloing?
that is literally rock climbing without any safety whatsoever.
Yeah,
No, I
like,
would-
because
no, I would not allow my kid to free solo, no.
Corey, you're doing the Canadian thing where like Canadians will like extrapolate a thing. You think that's like the place where people start, where it's like, oh, like we're like, and I'm saying that like where I'm
That's
going
what I was doing.
Well,
No,
yeah,
I'm saying
not-
no. I'm saying
not
I would not allow.
scrolling.
I'm saying I would not allow my kid to free solo. I would make sure
I'm
they
saying
had
I
safe.
would.
I would make sure they had safety
Where's your
equipment.
line?
Wait,
I think-
stop. I'm gonna explain where my line is. I'm gonna explain where my line is. I'm going to let my kid do what they feel like they want to do. At the same time, I'm going to make sure that they have the safety equipment to make whatever they want to do, whatever they feel passionate about. Because I'm not going to stop a kid that has
Free
passion.
soloing?
So what? Give me one. Can you give me 1 second? I would
You don't
appreciate that,
start
Corey.
with free
So
soloing.
can you give me 1 second? So I would make sure my kid. I wouldn't stop my kid's passion. I would make sure my kid's able to fulfill their passion, be able to do what they want to do. But I would also make sure that they have the much safety as possible for that event. So, for example, for climbing, right? Then I would say, no, you're not going to free solo. You're going to have the safety equipment that you need to be able to climb. And that would be that. If they eventually got to the point to where free soloing was an actual possibility, to where they could actually think about free soloing, more than likely they'd be above the age of 18, because I haven't really heard of the kids
You're a white
underneath 18 free soloing.
Yeah, because
but,
that's some white people shit.
But no, I would make sure they had safety
I can
equipment.
address that point.
Oh,
Like,
wait, I don't want you to address that point. I
Like we can reckon like we can do this for any like activity. Like we can
we're just
see,
switching
like,
up the conversation. From,
yeah,
like, the conversation started from like something that you went from like banning something that like other parents can't willingly like consent to participate their children doing something, to saying, would you personally allow your child to do this one thing? Actually don't care if Lactoid doesn't want his child to play football.
Yeah,
I
I'm with
care
that.
that Lactoid doesn't want my child to play football. I
Yeah.
think that's
But there is a level of risk, though, that I think it becomes incumbent on us to stop other kids from doing it. So one
Sure.
example I can think of is, despite all the safety equipment, and despite if they really have a passion for it and they really want to, we're not letting 14-year-olds join the military and go fight people and shoot at people and get shot at, because that has a risk that's unacceptable for a 14-year-old, right? And so there's some threshold that we all say no, right? I assume.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still teach my kid how to shoot.
Is the military a sport?
It's not.
Why
a
does that look
sport.
surprising? Why
Okay, so it's not.
why
a
does it look
sport.
so surprising
Okay,
that
cool.
wait,
So
was
we're
a
talking about
surprise?
sports, and you bring up the military. It's
Yeah,
not a sport.
like we have thresholds for certain things where we understand why we don't like do these things, you know? Like I think that's why
That's
like,
the only thing I'm trying to establish. Okay.
Well, right, like that's why the 14-year-old free
And
soloing.
I think 16.7% concussion is a little bit too high. That's just my
yeah, and I'm
if
that
we had
need
better
more
data, then like we would have a conversation. I just don't think
Yeah, we need
currently
yeah,
exists.
I need
this is like the hard truth.
I need
It's
better
like-
data, but again, I'm of the camp where I want to go harder in terms of regulations on the sport itself.
Sure.
Like
Okay. All right. So
I mean,
we went over
basically
time.
it's a roll
You
of
did
the
it,
dice.
Prime. You talked about football. Good job.
yeah, good job.
wanted
With
to
people who
make-
don't know about the sport. It's A+, but it's okay. It's okay.
Oh, well.
Some people want to
Uh,
read about like just use big words and have yellow and black in their background and then
Dialectic.
dialectic
so-
this is just we have to have the critical analysis of the button. It's like, God damn, bro, go outside. Raise your
Okay.
kids. I don't know what to tell you.
All right.
Oh man,
He's all the libertarian.
It's like-
so mad he can't have an argument.
No, it's just that I've never liked you, so it's like I'm not gonna be nice to you. So, but it's cool. We're on a panel together. It's all right.
Oh boy.
We can move past that.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, I'm just gonna have to leave it. Leave it there, guys. We are going to continue on to open walk on panel right after this. Where you, I guess you're sitting at home, may be involved. So stick around for that. The content does not end. It never ends. It never ends. Especially with social and chat for social media. First of all, hit the follow button on this channel. If you haven't done so yet, been enjoying this content, we'd love to have you. Twitter is where you'll find tweets. Discord, again, that's where the open panel is going to be. I want you to be part of it and just be a part of the community. TikTok and then YouTube is where you find the VODs. Like, comment, and subscribe. Okay, I'm going to give an outro out to all these great individuals, and we'll move on. But remember, content doesn't end, so no need to head out. We'll start with, unless I get tired, maybe. Keep the stream on. We'll start with Bam. Bam, thanks for coming on. Bam is one of the people who he's just been a great guest I can count on. So it was great to have you here on the Reverie. We usually don't have you. Thanks for coming on. It was really great.
Yeah, no, I did, and like I said, I did enjoy the conversation, regardless of the fact that I was also like super frustrated. No, I think that it is a difficult conversation to have with like a difficult conversation with there's a lot of nuances. Like I said, I think we need better data. I think I agree with Joe. We also need to aggregate why things are happening because, like I said, if you do have any type of relationship with sports, like it is true when these types of things happen, related to kickoffs and like special teams. But in general, yeah, I had a really good time. Y'all, I was gonna tell y'all to follow me, but don't follow me. Stay away. I'm a loner.
Thanks so much, friend. Okay.
Oh, snap. Last thing. I'm sorry. I'm moving on. Prime. That One Piece chapter, though. Crazy.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. You know what? I was thinking after that,
Oh, God.
Blame me. I was like, I need to hit up Bam. Like, we need to just sit down and talk. All right.
We do.
Yeah.
Love of the Hobbit.
Yeah.
Motherfuckers really advocate. Motherfuckers really advocate against statehood and just don't want to crack down on weeds.
Joe, don't break up the black community. It was doing so well.
Damn. We will.
I'll divide it. I'll divide it hard. Man, I'll divide it harder than LBJ, my friend.
Bam. We will. Oh my God, you're the worst. Joe,
I'll separate but equal the shit out of weeds.
DM me, please. DM me, please. Like when you're available. Like, and I'll just chill with you. I would really like to talk about it. All right. Next, we have Scott. Scott, thank you also for coming. It's amazing. Like, Scott, I thought
What's good?
It was a good conversation, and I didn't the second topic. I did not expect you to take that stance. I would not have thought you would do that. So it's interesting to see you on that side, and you know, back to back with Corey fighting the good fight. You know, that was amazing. So
Dipping away one small step at a time.
Yeah. So
long story short, I'm not letting my kid play football.
Fair enough.
Fuck out of here with that.
Yeah.
Not until you fix those rates. Because I'm willing to admit there is a threshold. And and say that 16% is way too fucking high.
And I was very happy to hear from you, and when you take an unexpected stance, I think those are one of the best streams, right? Because then I don't know what's gonna happen. Thank you again, Scott.
Yeah, so I am Scott from Fabian Liberty. Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse. Changing seasons, it happens. Anarcho-capitalist duo stream. We do a little bit of everything in politics space. But Thursday, come check us out. Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern. We will have Blair White, Taftash, Shapeshifter or Shifter of Shapes, and Tulipar, two fairly well-known D-trans people, as well as I think everybody knows who Blair White is, and Taftash if you're on Twitch. And we may or may not have Buck Angel, just depending on his stream, on his schedule. So just talking about questioning gender and what it's like to be a trans person, and a lot more conservative opinions of individuals that have experienced it. So it should be a fun panel. Yeah, come check it out.
Thank you. All right, let's go. Everything's moved on my screen, so let's go to our friend Corey. As well has been great. And again, another person I can always really rely on. So I appreciate having you here. You put up a great fight today, Corey. I'd love to see it.
I tried to do a little bit less fence sitting on the second topic. Stake out my position. Yeah, as always, super grateful to be here. I always love being here. And despite the slight disagreement with Joe, I still love Joe. And again, I totally can see that there's probably a version of football that can exist, that there's just minimal risk of injury or concussion, but it's probably just like, it's probably I think some people would say it's no longer football at that point. As in, I'd probably just maybe to be the safest, it's just like flag football, and that's just how it's got to be. But I think pretty much most people would be against it. Like, that's not football. That's a perverted version of football. But yeah, I'm Corey Campbell. Oh, and I also definitely love my fellow Canadian, Lactoid, and Sprouticus, and definitely love you, Prime, as always. Appreciate the invitation. I'm Corey Campbell. You can find me on twitch.tv, CoreyCampbell84, and on Twitter and Instagram, literally, it's Corey Campbell.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Next we have our local naturalized agent. Let's go to our friend Lactoid. Lactoid. Thank you as well. This was a really good fight from you too. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, you were tossing some blows out there.
Thank you for having me, Prime. I think I agree with Scott here. I don't know if I would let my kid play football. I guess it would depend also on how naturally large they are as a person. I'll make the decision when the time comes. Okay.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'2".
all
So
Oh, you're shitting out 6-footers, my friend. You better be careful. You better make sure your partner ain't 5'8", or that's 6'5" automatic.
Okay. So anyway, I'll decide when the time comes. I think I like basketball more anyway, so hopefully I'll push them towards that. First topic, don't trade with China, don't trade with any communists. And I think it's a great segue into who I am. If you like what I had to say, you can find me on Anti-Communism United on Discord and Twitch. And then on Twitter at Anti-Com-United. Again, thank you, Prime, for having me on. Thank you for everybody who debated with me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And feel free to put your links in chat, especially your Discord link, so that people can find you there. I don't know if anyone from my chat want to go there. Right? We love our communists, right?
But pro-communism united. All the Corey Campbell PCU.
Let's go to our friend Sprouticus. Sprouticus, thanks for coming through and sharing some of those personal stories. I'm honestly sorry that you're having that knee pain that's apparently for life. But yeah, thank you for sharing experiences.
No, you're good. It's just it's stuff that the ability to go back out in the field needs to be taken out of the player's hands. Because me and anyone else who's played sports knows how hard it is for the player to give up on their team and say that they can't go back out in the field. And so it needs to be taken out of the player's hands, it needs to be taken out of the coach hands. It needs to be left to a neutral party that's going to be able to fairly diagnose what's going on. And to just bring a little bit of more stats in, according to the National Library of Medicine, concussions for 15 to 24 years old are sports is second only to motor vehicle crashes, so it's more dangerous concussion-wise to ride or drive a motor vehicle than it is to play sports. And concussions represented 8.9% of all high school athletic injuries. And so that is including football and any other sport. And so I think that proves to show that a couple of the stats were over guesstimating how many actually injuries considered as the Library of Medicine. But I think it was a great discussion. I think it was a great debate. I love talking to everybody here. So yeah, if you liked what I had to say, go follow me at @thespraticus on Twitch and Twitter. But other than that, guys, I'm excited for seeing y'all again.
Yeah, thank you. And last, our friend Joe Lewis, who usually isn't here, but Joe, like all the time, if you've watched this channel, if you've seen Joe here, Joe on multiple occasions, whenever he's the slightest chance to do so, will try to turn a topic into sports, or
derail it, or completely derail the topic. I'm very good at that.
Exactly.
Shout out to lollipops and pedophiles.
So I finally wanted to give him a chance. When I thought of this topic, I gotta invite Joe, and I was really surprised when he said yes. But this was his chance. I wanted him to finally get it all out there. I hope you enjoyed that, then, Joe.
Yeah, I did. It sucks that it comes from a topic of somebody having probably permanent brain damage. But it was still a fun topic. And honestly, I think that like Corey and Octo and myself, I think we're all kind of close to sort of certain premises of it, right? Where it's like we want to make the best decisions for our children when they enter into these activities. If they want to enter into these activities, it's our responsibility to make sure they make the best informed decision about what they do. I haven't really elaborated on my sports takes, so I'm a little authoritarian when it comes to football, mainly because I think that the NFL especially is in the business of lying to parents about, and lying to children too, really good at lying to children about like what is possible in the sport, where like not every single kid is going to be a wide receiver, like a wide receiver in the NFL, but there's a lot of other positions and a lot of other things you can do in these activities that doesn't involve being on the field. And I think that one of the things that the NFL could do, and this is true to the high school level as well, is revealing the work opportunities that exist within these activities, and showing that there's a clear correlation between like being on the sideline as like an offensive coordinator, offensive assistant to the offensive coordinator, assistant to the defensive coordinator, assistant to the coach, that could lead to a very profitable and cushy career within the activity that leads you into having a good life and going in like I don't know. I'm very pro sports medicine. I'm very pro like going into sports as a means of a profession. But I'm very like strict on these things. Like, I mean, we didn't get to it, Lactoid. Like, I'm gonna limit the number, or even Core 2. Like, I'm gonna limit the number of players allowed on high school teams. Like, period. Where it's ridiculous to me that you'll have like a field of like 80 kids, and it's like, you know, half of you kids are more valuable in the marching band because everybody starts in that. And you can also like go a whole career without getting injured in marching band, and then go on to do like you can join the military and do music. That pays really fucking well. That's my non-righty take, by the way. I'm very pro military when it comes to musicians. Very pro military. But
I am.
But listen.
That's
I
good, Joe. That's
Yeah,
good.
it's trust me. My community hates it when I talk about the army and simp for the military events.
I am
Joe,
glad
don't you-
that Joe has reignited my dream of being an NFL water boy. All right, it's on the table
Bobby
now.
Boucher?
Yeah,
Don't
Bobby
you-
Boucher.
Also,
It was a great
maybe-
movie. It was a great movie. It was
Don't you,
fantastic.
immediately,
I loved it.
don't you immediately
I
become
cried, I
a
think.
sergeant if you join the band for the army? Don't you like
They
immediately become a sergeant?
for the audition groups, they treat you nice. They treat you nice.
Yeah.
Like, they treat you nice.
I had a friend that was a Marine band. It's fucking dope.
I'm almost positive you immediately become a sergeant if you join
And
the
then
band.
you come out,
like
and then when you ever see those
You're
like.
not- Yeah.
You ever see those like army propaganda where it's like it's the dude on the edge that has the fatigues on, and then it's the little kid who's looking at him like, wow, he's so inspiring. And in the back of his mind is like, nigga, I played the flute for 4 years and now I'm an army vet. He doesn't need to know that shit. Like,
Joe,
he goes out there in Iraq fucking just like
Joe-
catering to Rob North's talking points. Meanwhile, you got some nigga on playing for Obama and other fucking presidents. Like
Joe,
almost
I'm
object.
almost. It's either that or it's the guy that's at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers, to where he just does the
trumpet guy.
rifle,
Oh,
the
the
rifle
bugle.
ship and does
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
wow.
it's there's like I'm pro jobs when it comes to music in the military. And then also I guess the last thing, and then I'll shut the fuck up. Make ADOS a recognized legal racial category. If you want to fight with that on Thursday, we can fight on that on Thursday.
Oh my god, I would love to. So if only this military band thing sounds amazing. If only I had a thing called talent. But you know, that's why I'm here on Twitch.
Tell that to the
Alright, so
people
we
who play in
will
those bands.
we will continue on to open walk on panel right after this. If anybody here wants to join, we'd love to have you, but if not, that's okay. Thanks for your time, your energy, your knowledge, and your passion for my community. I know they appreciate just what I do. Have a good one. Goodbye.
Always great.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye. Oh man, I gotta write that down.